So, good morning. My name is Dr. Alexander Ross. I'm based at New College, where I'm doing research on a number of things. Predominantly at the moment, a book on Blade Runner. Any Blade Runner fans in the room? Okay, 2 hands. That's 3, 4. Okay, we're getting there. Good. So I hope you'll find these the 3 lectures I'm giving today useful and interesting. The way these things work best is if we make them interactive. So please, if there's anything you want to find out more about or you don't understand, stop me and ask. By the way, this is a safe space. There is no such thing as a stupid question. So please don't sit there quietly. Just go for it. The only thing I ask for is that if you're going to provide each other feedback, do so with kindness, be constructive. Saying that something does not work is not particularly helpful. Provide a suggestion on how to improve the project if you can. Also be supportive. Hopefully you will not only have made friends amongst your peers here, but lifelong support for each other's writing. Part of the research I just completed on blockbuster films looked at the generation of filmmakers that came out of the University of Southern California's film school, or hung out with them, like Spielberg, because he wasn't good enough to get in. In the mid-1970s, you had John Milius, you had Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who wrote Back to the Future. You had Randall Kleiser, who did a film called Grease. You had a guy called George Lucas. These guys became firm friends and supported each other throughout their lives. None of them would have gotten as far as they have without their support. So I'm working with a number of really exceptional screenwriters at the moment, and I'm really trying to understand, this is part of my research, how they've had these amazing careers. So people like Hampton Fancher, who wrote both Blade Runner scripts, and David Webb Peoples, who also worked on Blade Runner, but he got the Academy Award for The Unforgiven. All sorts of people, and literally without exception, all of these people have had careers and have succeeded because they built up a really supportive network of other writers or directors and so on who've seen them through. So there's been instances where they've shared with me where they were so scared about the job they'd just been given writing a major screenplay that they couldn't get out of bed. So even major screenwriters who, Academy Award winners, there's issues. So as I said, please make the most of your support systems, because they're absolutely crucial to having a career. Quick introduction on myself, the trouble I've been getting into over the last too many years. I moved to Los Angeles in my 20s, worked for MGM as a script analyst, and then became a literary agent in Beverly Hills. I was Tarantino's first co-agent, discovered Andrew Niccol, who wrote The Truman Show, Iris Yamashita, who wrote Letters from Iwo Jima for Clint Eastwood. Both of those were Academy nominated, and quite a few others. I started off my own management production company called Fortis Entertainment. Fortis was eventually sold to Sandra Bullock. During my 15 years in Hollywood, I ran close to 3,000 pitch meetings at the studios, mainly with the heads of production. Somewhere along the line, I was also elected a member of BAFTA. I came back to the UK to get a PhD based on my experiences in the film industry, which led to 5 years of research on what makes films succeed at the box office. I use an oral history approach, which involves me interacting directly with various filmmakers, and to also continue my own learning process. For instance, I'm presently working on a book, as I just mentioned, on Blade Runner, and I recently had lunch with its producer, a chap called Michael Dealey, who's absolutely superb individual. He also produced one of my very favorite films called Deer Hunter. Has anybody seen Deer Hunter here? Yeah, great. That's awesome, because that is one of the best characterizations of, best scripts in terms of creating amazing characters that I've ever come across. So I revisit it every few months. The scene, by the way, the Russian roulette scene, that was all apparently totally invented by Robert De Niro. He just kind of made it up. So that's a cool thing about the films, when that kind of creativity is allowed to be part of the process. A lot of directors are not open to it. Moving on. So yeah, I'm particularly interested in the careers of screenwriters and how they have changed over the last 50 years. For instance, before the mid-1970s, key script decisions were made between the writer, the director, the producer, and maybe a studio executive. After Jaws in 1975, and the identification and highlighting of replicable keys to commercial success in screenplays, as well as the advent of script gurus, writers started to find themselves in conference rooms with up to a dozen people to please, and on the receiving end of endless script notes. In 1987, Dawn Steele was appointed the head of Columbia Pictures. She replaced a lot of the cinephile executives with MBAs, lawyers, accountants. All of the studios followed suit, and the job of the screenwriter changed forever. I have a book coming out this autumn on blockbuster films, surprise, surprise, which is about replicable component parts that give us blockbuster after blockbuster. So basically, I found, looking at key scripts over the last 50 years, there's certain replicable elements, story elements, that tend to resurface in script after script after script. And I will get into that in greater detail and also give you my perspective and my feelings about that. I also advise the EU on their film financing program, the EACEA, and I'm also producing Habib Zagarpour's first film as a director. He is twice Academy nominated and BAFTA winning VFX visionary, who amongst other things did the VFX for Blade Runner in 2049. If you saw the famous sex scene in that film, which Professor Stephen Mulhall at New College described as amongst the most uncannily powerful in the film, indeed in the history of cinematic incarnations of sexual longing, that threesome scene, the interaction of the three characters in 2049, Habib did that. So he's the guy I'm producing his first movie. Key observation here. You may at this stage ask yourselves why you should care about the Hollywood-based film industry when you would be quite happy to write for the BBC, which is fair enough. The bottom line is, I'll be frank with you, is money. If you want to become a professional screenwriter and have a long career, pay your mortgage, put food on the table, raise a family, all that kind of good stuff, if you're good enough, Hollywood will come calling. And if it does, you had better be prepared, because otherwise you will be eaten alive. The rates of pay are also radically different. One client of mine, shortly after optioning a script to MGM, so just optioning, he didn't sell it, nor was the movie made. He just got an option out of MGM. His quote went through the roof, and he was paid $300,000 to do a rewrite in someone else's script. It was 1 month's work. So it's not the kind of money you can, unfortunately, at the moment pull down in the UK. So just be aware of the differences in potential income. I've entitled this first lecture, first of three, how to find your voice as a screenwriter and avoid becoming a clone. So what is your voice? That's a hard one to answer to start off with. It's not easy to define. It is who you are through your life experience, the books you have read, the people who have influenced you. Hampton Fancher, again, I will be referring to him several times over, but he's the guy who wrote Blade Runner, both scripts. Spent years as an actor before writing the Blade Runner script. This is what he told me last week. Acting and writing are the same thing. Very, very important. I was always interested in writing. I learned about writing through acting. David Peoples was an editor for many years. He's the guy who did Unforgiven. So basically what I'm trying to say between the lines is having some form of life experience is really, really important. So I always find that some of the better people come in who are, people who've been, I don't know, surgeons, lawyers, military people, all sorts. So, and years ago, even I was hanging out with a film director called Michael Cimino, who did The Deer Hunter, and he already had Academy Awards to his name, and he was working with Oliver Stone, and both these guys have just been, filmmakers all their lives, or have been. And they were even, at that stage of their careers, getting in the back of a black and white in Los Angeles, in East LA, with the police to do their research to really be able to write about the police experience and so on and so forth. So you can always tell the difference between somebody who's been to the library and researched, whatever story you want to get into or characters, and versus someone who's actually gone that, taking the trouble to hang out with those people and so on. So just, word of advice. So it is also, finding your voice is also about the kind of story you are, your personal distinct way of telling a story. Really bland scripts that never get produced tend to have no distinct voice. Great scripts like Blade Runner or Unforgiven, Deer Hunter, LA Confidential, The Usual Suspects, or pretty much anything written by Steven Zalian or Tarantino, you always know who has written them. A lot of writers try to imitate their favorite screenwriters. Don't. You'll be considered a clone, and he or she will always do a better job at it than you will. The best way to find that elusive voice is by writing and writing till it comes to you. Throw the first 10, 20, 30 pages away, but then at some stage it will click. We will later on do a writing exercise, time permitting, so we'll be able to focus on that a little bit more. Writing the script. Let me see if I can get this slide to move. Can you read that? Yeah, okay. So this is my bit on script gurus who have greatly influenced the industry since the mid 1970s. Arguably not always for the good. Robert McKee, Sid Field, Linda Seeger, Christopher Vogler, who wrote The Writer's Journey, Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero's Journey, a lot of journeys. All of these people are hugely important to the industry, and I know that some of them are on your course reading list. I think McKee is definitely. You need to understand that studio executives, producers, development executives, and agents are not creative types. They are interested in making money. So they read these books and do the McKee course in order to understand what you do and to give you feedback, to steer you creatively, but also to ensure that you stick to a certain structure that minimizes the risk of investing in film. So as a result, these gurus have become the arbiters of what is good and bad writing. They have told generations of writers how to write their scripts, yet they themselves have never written a film of note. When I was a studio reader at MGM, we were trained to analyze scripts according to specific criteria. The training was basically an abbreviated form of the McKee course. Has anybody done the McKee course in the room? Oh, good. US mainstream screenwriting is largely about control. You need to deliver certain things by certain pages, or your script will be considered unprofessional. Inciting incidents, turning points, setups, payoffs, act breaks. There needs to be a reason for everything. Everything needs to be neatly answered and tied up by the end of the script. Development executives and script analysts are continuously looking for a reason to put down a script, and if your script does not conform, you have a problem. So I'm trying to clarify, and I will go into it in greater detail, the disparity between the people who will read your scripts and you as a creative writer trying to do something original and different and create a great movie. And I'm going to talk a lot about the obstacles in your way and also about how to get around them. McKee recommends that you draft a detailed 60 or so page treatment and then go to script, so there's no confusion. You know exactly where everything goes. To me, this is like painting by numbers, creating an engineering-grade blueprint for writing a screenplay. So you can tell I'm not a fan. I'm not saying that McKee is good or bad. A lot of writers are happy with the structure that he provides. These gurus ask a lot of pertinent questions of your screenplay, but this approach does not work for everyone. What I'm saying is that you need to find a way that works for you. As a former agent and literary manager, I've seen a lot of writers try and impose the McKee structure on their work and fail miserably. Not because they could not construct the necessary step outline framework, but because this way of writing clashed with their creative instincts and made them profoundly unhappy. So I used to be able to mention people's names, but because this is recorded and everyone's suing these days, so I'm just going to have to refer to people as very eminent director or screenwriter and so on. I had a writer who'd done a very successful movie for 20th Century Fox, and he was part of a writing team. And he then subsequently, the writing team split up, and both writers went their own way. And my guy thought he would do the McKee course in order to, you know, get with what everyone was doing at that stage in Hollywood and still are. And he did this thing, and he sat down to write his next screenplay, which was a fantastic story about a homeless baseball team. Really lovely story. And again, this is a guy who'd written a very successful film at Fox. And he sat down to write in the McKee way, and he created the outline, and he tried to go to script. And basically, his MO was to write the perfect page, and he never got past page 2. I mean, I saw him. I was trying to encourage him, because part of the job as a good literary agent or manager is also to be a mentor, to encourage, and to identify the weaknesses of your client, your writer, and help them get to the next stage. And I swear I tried really hard, because this guy had a really major career ahead of him, and he just couldn't do it. I mean, the entire process of trying to conform to this McKee structure, 65 pages, and then you go to script, he just couldn't do it. And sadly, last time I heard from him, he was actually selling shoes in Santa Monica. So hugely talented guy. I mean, just really sad. So this is a case study. I can provide you many others. There are 2 ways you need to entertain in a screenplay. One is by having an original idea. The other is by the way you tell the story, so your style as a writer. Your style, your talent, your voice. No one will ever confuse a script by Tarantino with one by Steven Zalian or David Hare or Mamet. Do their scripts conform to the structure that I have been talking about, the McKee, Seeger, inner structure? I would argue on the whole that they do not. So where is all this going, I hear you think? What are my options? Let's move slides. Okay, has anybody heard of Jean-Claude Carrière? No? Okay, you will by the end of this lecture. So, as I said, I have an issue with a lot of these screenwriting gurus never having written a screenplay that is of note, that is of any consequence. So to me, that is like going to have surgery, but your surgeon has never performed surgery, has you know where I'm going with this, right? Is not even a qualified MD. So to me, that's just problematic. So I'm going to talk about Jean-Claude Carrière. Jean-Claude Carrière passed away sadly a couple of years ago. He was arguably France's greatest living screenwriter. I would say he's one of the greatest screenwriters we've ever had. So just briefly going through his credits in terms of, so he started off his career with Luis Buñuel. If you're not familiar with Buñuel, you should definitely look into him. He was the Salvatore Dali of screenwriting. I mean, his voice was so strong, his style was so dominant that you will see it surfacing in films to this day. I mean, he's just, one of the key filmmakers of all time. So what do you have here? He did La Belle du Jour, which is a classic. And by the way, these are the movies he had made. This doesn't even factor in the scripts that he wrote that were never made. This Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. The Tin Drum, Volker Schlöndorff, absolute masterpiece. The Return of Martin Guerre. I think that was one of the first roles of, I've forgotten his name now, Depardieu. When he excelled now. En Amour de Swann, Proust. The Unbearable Lightness of Being, which is I think Milan Kundera, right? It was Diana Day-Lewis, Juliette Binoche, and again, an outstanding movie. Valmont, the Mahabharata, I think it was Peter Brook. Cyrano de Bergerac, A Play in the Fields of the Lord. I think that was the Sean Connery. The Return of Casanova. I mean, on and on and on and on. And Father Goriot, Glorious Ghosts. That was an amazing film. At Eternity's Gate. So arguably, this is a guy who knows what he's talking about. I mean, there's not that many screenwriters who've ever been produced to this extent. Not only was an amazing screenwriter, he was also an amazing novelist and playwright, and a foremost intellectual. I mean, he wrote a book with Umberto Eco about their book collections, why we need to read books these days, and the importance of literature and being a screenwriter. And it's just amazing. Hampton is, again, one of the guys I'm studying right now, and he's written a number of things, but the key ones you will be able to relate to are Blade Runner. Okay, so I had the pleasure and honor of meeting Jean-Claude Carrière many years ago when I was working, having to run the Arts Film Festival in Cambridge, and it's a very good entry point, by the way, if any of you, so in terms of networking and so on and so forth, going to film festivals, and there's always, you know, amazing directors and screenwriters and people coming in, and they will have time to talk to you. So anyway, he came in the early flight to Cambridge, and he talked about one of his films, and then the guy who ran the film festival said, well, there's 3 hours between this event and then the next event, so Alex, you know, take Jean-Claude punting, which was a fraught adventure because I didn't know how to punt. So I nearly drowned 2 or 3 times, which was, I'm sure, fairly entertaining to him. But I was writing, I was trying to get screenwriting myself at that stage. So it was 21. And I written a screenplay, and what happened was that something happened. The characters came to life to such an extent that they started writing themselves. So I didn't end up with 111 whatever pages of screenplay. I ended up with like over 300. So I had a screenplay and then the 2 sequels already in place. And if you talk to people like McKee and, you know, all that lot, they will say, oh my God, you're such a rank amateur, completely idiotic way of going about things. If you can't control the process, you're an amateur. So carpe diem, I was talking to Jean-Claude, and I said, well, I'm going to bite the bullet, and I'm actually going to talk to him about this, about the process. And I said to him, I said, look, at times I'm sitting down, I'm writing, the characters take over to such an extent that I'm like watching a film myself, or something, episodic television, something. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know where they're going to go. I'm being entertained as literally I'm writing these things. And he went very quiet and frowned and looked at me. I said, oh, God, I'm going to get trashed by like one of the greatest living screenwriters ever. And he said, that happens to me very rarely. And I said, I want to jump in the river right now. He said, but when it does, I know I'm doing my best work. So to me, truth be told, that is the key difference between European and American screenwriting. Control, and then see where the characters take you. So bear that in mind. This gets us to one of my favorite quotes from Francis Ford Coppola. Wish I could make that a bit smaller. See that? Yeah, okay. Now here we are, 20 years after Heaven's Gate, which was Cimino, sadly. Directors don't have much power anymore. The executives make unheard amounts of money, and budgets are more out of control than ever. And there hasn't been a classic in 10 years. And this is the guy who gave us The Godfather, amongst other things. So just bear that in mind in terms of, you know, the process. So my advice to you is, oh, by the way, I ran this Jean-Claude story by Hampton as well, because I thought, you know, you don't want to take one person's perspective on, you know, characters coming to life and that way of writing and so on and so forth. And Hampton completely agreed with me. He said, no, that happens to me all the time as well. So so again, it's not for everybody. Quite a few people gravitate to that structure that, you know, the McKees of this world provide you. But if the structure doesn't work for you, there's definitely a more holistic way of going about things and writing screenplays. So, you know, that's my take on it. So basically learn the rules, but also learn how to break them. Find your own voice, learn to defend your vision. You will need to adapt. For instance, when you're talking to producers, this is my whole spiel about avoiding obstacles in order to get where you want to be to get produced. So one of the obstacles is obviously these producer types. Make your case when you're talking to a producer, and again, or an agent or a studio executive or whoever, as I said, they need to make money with their films. So when you're talking to them, don't get all particularly creative. Make your case in terms of how will this film make money? How will it attract key talent in terms of directors, actors, and so on? So always pick your battles. So make your case on how the film will make money. When you get past them, things tend to become a lot more interesting. Once you get to the creatives, the directors, the actors, those are your real allies. Okay, so I'm just investigating the way Hampton Fancher has been working with Ridley Scott, how he worked on the original Blade Runner in 2049, and it's an amazing story because because very often their working relationship is about locking antlers. They're basically, Ridley will come up with an idea, and Hampton and his colossal genius will just say, no, you're wrong. I fully disagree with you. It just totally fends off Ridley Scott. But then Ridley will provide him with a visual, because he's very focused. He's very persistent. I think that's the word that Hampton uses to describe him most of all. He's incredibly persistent. So, and he knows how to work with screenwriters, and he's been doing it for a long time. So I suspect that Ridley actually really enjoys the pushback he's getting from Hampton, because most screenwriters these days, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, sir, they will just totally try and purely give the director what they want in terms of instead of creating a sort of dialectic interaction between the two of them. So, but then, for instance, in 2049, Ridley came up with this visual. He told them, well, I see a pot of soup on a stove. And if you've seen your 2049, you know what scene I'm referring to. And he gave that to Hampton. Hampton just went, and that's the guy's genius, because if he gave me that image of a pot of soup on a stove, I have no idea what to do with it. But Hampton was such a genius. He went and created the opening scene of Blade Runner 2049 out of that. When the spinner comes in with Kay and comes down with a tree, and they find the body, that's the skeleton that's buried underneath the tree, and then he kills the replicant and so on. Anyway, that's just to give an idea how these things work. So I think one of the reasons that Ridley Scott has worked with Hampton for so many years is because he actually enjoys that, not just the creativity, but the pushback. So I'm going to elaborate about the working relationship between writers and directors a bit later on as well. So another thing I'm going to be talking about today is how to become a working screenwriter. So there's a tendency of becoming obsessed with the industry, having an agent, producers, executives, lawyers, auction deals, doing lunch, screenings, openings, blah, blah, blah. Most of the real filmmakers that I know are really not into that. They're not the people you will run into late night at clubs and expensive restaurants. They're working. They're up at 5 a.m. They're making their movies. So my advice to you is start thinking of yourselves more as a filmmaker. So stop thinking about pleasing agents, producers, development people, etc., and start going to film festivals. Find people who share your taste, your vision. Start thinking, as I said, like a filmmaker. A filmmaker does not need an agent. I'm on my 4th agent in 2 years, so trust me on that front. I'm talking from experience. You need a good script, camera, lights, sound equipment, post-production, actors, obviously, good food on the set. It's amazing the deals you can get and the actors you can entice to participate in something different if you're writing something different. At all times, trying to deal with the talent directly. You'll be surprised at the people who will respond. When I was at film school and, happily or unhappily making shorts, I used to work at a gym close to the film school, and I noticed there was a very eminent Royal Shakespeare Company actor was working out of the gym, and in a nice way, because I think celebrity types these days are very hesitant about anybody approaching them and so on and so forth. So I found a nice way of doing it, and I got this guy to be in my short. And I obviously couldn't pay him. It was like 2 days of work, but I gave him a really nice bottle of champagne. He was happy. And as a result, I also got. Do you remember a filmmaker called Derek Jarman? Anybody remember? Right. Okay. So I also got Derek Jarman to help me on my shorts, just by going to the Cambridge Film Festival. I met him through that. So, as I said, go out there. If you have an agent, the last thing you should do is wait for the agent to give you a career. So, get your own network together and as a filmmaker, and then things will start happening. If you end up writing a small indie film that does well on the festival circuit, agents will come after you. and those doors will open on your own terms. At least that is the advice we gave Tarantino, and it seems to have worked out for him. Any questions at this stage? Is anything unclear? No questions. Okay. Yes, the man in the back.
So if you're in a position where you've got a screenplay and you're relatively happy with it, do you then suggest not trying to shop it to agents, things like that, but maybe trying to develop a network you can share?
I'm going to get into that in greater detail about the working relationship with agents, so on, but in a nutshell, it's kind of hard to get into in a nutshell, actually. Agents who take on new writers will take you on. They will make like 4 or 5 submissions on your behalf, and if your thing doesn't sell, you're history. You're gone. So, considering how much time it takes to find an agent, personally, my take is unless you've written the kind of script which is like 10, 20, 30 million or something, which there's no way you're going to be able to produce yourself and get it made, right? Then you have no other choice. You have to go through the corporate film industry, agent, manager, lawyer, blah, blah, blah kind of route. But if it's something containable, with something that you've written that could be made for, I don't know, a couple of million, so on and so forth, then my advice would be control the process. If an agent comes after you because you've done really good, you won a screenwriting contest, or you've done really well at a short film festival and so on and so forth, the relation is kind of different than if you go on knocking on people's doors and please, sir, please, madam, will you take me on, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'll start getting into that in greater detail, but I think the defining part of that is, you know, pretty much the budget, the size of the script you've written. If it's something pretty expensive, then you have no choice. You have no choice. Okay, but as I said, I'll get into greater detail because it's very complex. There's a lot of mistakes you can make. Okay, so what I want to do at this stage, where are we at? Is a stream of consciousness writing exercise. Okay, remember what I was saying about actors taking over on the page? Okay, so I want us to try that. I want you to try that. So you're all working on stories or a screenplay or something, right? And you've got characters. So what I need you to do is put your characters, 2 tops 3, into a room and give them as much conflict as possible with each other. So, like, you know, one wants something from the other one that they're not getting, or that one knows something about the other one that affects their relationship, or make it a marital thing, or just take characters out of the pieces that you're working on. And let's just take 15 minutes to write those out, and just stream of consciousness. Don't go get plot heavy and so on. Just have them interact, okay? And at the end of that, let's see where it gets us to, and hopefully there'll be questions. And some of you will be happy to read it out. So just 15 minutes. Write out the conflict between 2, maybe 3 characters.
In the form of dialogue.
Yes, please. Yeah, you don't need exterior opening, all that kind of stuff. Just have them go at it. Okay. If anybody's lost or has questions, I'm wandering around, so just grab me. Another 5 minutes. Couple more minutes. Okay. How did that work out for you guys? Was anybody completely lost? No? Okay, let's have some feedback. How did that work for you? What are your thoughts? Yes, you.
You are pointing at me.
Yes, I'm pointing at you.
I thought it was interesting doing that stream of consciousness because I just wrote the conversation as the characters would have said it. And then when I paused at the end, I found myself questioning it going, oh, but is this structured enough? All those kind of structuring points that you were talking about earlier, I was like, oh, but this is just people rambling on and with a conflict. And so it was a good example of the two different approaches, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Times it can be a bit like driving a car with a handbrake on, can't it? If you're going in one direction and then something else suddenly pulls you back and then sort of interferes with the creative process. Yeah, I found really releasing that handbrake. How did that work out for you?
Really good. I realised that my character is a murderer and I don't know how I haven't seen it. But now I know why. So that was so useful.
Usually what happens is that the first, I mean, you just had 15 minutes to do this, so this is kind of, I'm really on it as an exercise, but once you get into it in greater detail, you know, you throw away the first 10 pages, but then page 15 or 20 or whatever, you know, so it'll be okay, 50 pages, whatever, things start happening and the characters really start to find themselves and telling you who they are and where they want to go, and please don't mess with me, I want to go in a certain direction, and then it's much more organic, because if you do it, you know, when these 65-page treatment thingies, you know, then you suddenly feel yourself, well, you know, I have between page 7 and 10, my character has to turn into a murderer and do something, and it's like, how the hell do you pull that off, you know? So like the character does on their own volition, it's much more interesting, and what happens quite often is that you end up a completely different screenplay. You might be writing a romantic comedy, and then you already set on murder, and then you know. So definitely there's I just as somebody who's written and dealt with a lot of writers, I think this is part of the joy of the creative process, trying to force things, you know, into a certain structure. It just, as I said, it worked for some people. I'm just, as you can tell, not exactly keen on it. How did it work for you?
At first I was really struggling because I was focusing on, like, I really wanted to create as much conflict as possible, and I think that kind of blocked me. So the characters were just speaking too directly, so instead of like having a little bit of subtext, they were just saying like, oh, this and this, how characters wouldn't talk. And so in the end I got somewhere where they were talking about something else, and then like it started to flow in the last couple of minutes.
Yeah,
I
always towards the end, the beginning is always dreadful. It's just kind of, how about you? Same thing, improving towards the end, and
Yeah.
you know, how about you?
I realised I need to do a bit more research because I'm writing about Britain and America. I don't know much of geography, and also I realised some of the phrases and just think through how to make American sound more American and British sound a bit more British.
That is not easy. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Writing good American dialogue, or you know, I don't know, a German person speaking English dialogue, or French, but you know what I'm saying? That's really complex stuff. I'm not going to address that today, but I share the pain. It was for you.
I quite enjoyed it. It was hard at the start.
Yeah.
But then once you got into it and got an idea, then it just flowed.
It kind of goes, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, the same. I mean, the characters. It's like I'm getting to know the characters as they have a dialogue. So I mean, discovering that one of the characters is a drug lord. So it's like I struggle with the exposition. Sort of, it's a start of me getting to know the characters really.
Well, them getting to know you. They're introducing themselves to you at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very interesting the way it's going, you know. It's starting to take shape.
Throw conflict at them, throw the weirdest conflict at them, see how they respond. Well, it's an exercise, it's a lab in many ways. How did it work out for you?
It was quite stilted. I'd need to do a lot more.
Define stilted.
It just didn't flow as much as I wanted it to.
Sure.
But there were a couple of interesting things coming out. Like the conflict was actually different
one character went another way than I thought they'd go.
Yeah.
So the conflict became about something else.
Yeah.
So I need to pursue it a lot more, but it was interesting.
Take the bits that work for you, jump the rest. Just see where it takes you to. Your colleague next to you, yeah. How about you?
I found it quite hard to differentiate the voices at first. They both sounded really similar, but towards the end.
Were there voices, characters you were already working with, or you just totally plucked them out of the ether?
Yeah, they're ones I've already been
Okay.
working with, but they kind of talk like me. But towards the end of it, they started to get their own voices a bit more. I think.
Right. One of the things I always advise writers to do, over and over and over again, engage with actors, good actors, as often as you can, and run your work by them, and learn from them about what actors have to do to create a character on stage. There's so much synergy there. I mean, good actors are your best, one of the best places for you to go and learn to develop your craft. Because if you write a character in such a way that an actor doesn't know how to take your structure, your character definition, and turn it into an actable type exercise, then you're not doing it right. So actors can definitely tell you, how to make things real anyway. And there's nothing, especially when you get to the dialogue side of things, if an actor can't say the lines on stage or on camera, they will tell you very quickly, and very often they will come up with an improvement as well. So that's an absolutely brilliant way of learning how to write really good dialogue. How about you? How did you fare?
I wouldn't say it was the best piece of dialogue I've edited.
In 15 minutes, it can't be expected, yeah.
Yeah, I think for most of it, I felt they didn't really say anything, so I was sort of maybe circling around the actual conflict, and then because I sort of didn't want to, I don't know, I was sort of trying to maybe set the scene a bit more than I should, instead of just sort of getting straight in. And yeah, maybe also they sounded a bit similar. So sort of by the end, we sort of managed to sort of say, sort of differentiate, hear the voices.
Good. So things improved. How are you?
Yeah, I found it was slow to start with, and then I suddenly had this revelation of how they were linked to something else in the plot that I hadn't thought of the link between them before. So it sort of came out of nowhere, which was really good.
Good. So you ended up in a better place by the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Really helpful.
Oh, good.
Just having dialogue, because normally I will write some prose and I will stick in some dialogue. But when you're just doing the dialogue with no description, it really makes you think, well, if he says this, what is actually the response? And I feel I'm getting to know them a lot better by just having a few pages of interaction and just words between them. And it's awful, but I'm going to carry on because I think I am actually going to get somewhere with it.
It's a lot to do with the subtext as well, isn't it? It's less about what is actually being said. It's more what is kind of intended, what the subtext is, and what they're sort of suggesting, what's in their mind. So makes for more interesting, complex psychological profiles of your characters. So but yeah, that's definitely the right direction to go in. How about you?
I found it interesting how they both kind of approach conflicts differently. And one of the characters was definitely like aggy and like loud, and then the other one was kind of doing her conflict in a much more kind of spiky and silent way. So it's interesting to see their personalities kind of come through.
Right.
The argument they're having.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just relevant conflict and surprises. It's always good to, when at times a character's just kind of rattling it off, they're like they're phoning it in, and you kind of go, it's not going anywhere, and just surprise them with something completely out of the blue, and then see how they react. And at times that jolt makes them suddenly come to life because, hold on, this is actually kind of interesting now, and I can take this somewhere else. And also really study great dialogue writers. There are not as many as you would think. People like, David Hare and Jez Butterworth, who wrote Jerusalem. I mean, they're absolute masters at great dialogue, and Stephen Zavian is a number of them, but it's just absolutely superb what they do. I mean, some of Hampton Fancher's lines and later on 2049, they're so good, you want to frame them. But on the wall, you're just, oh my God, how do you do that? And he's so dismissive of his own talent at the same time. You know, it's a really great line. Yes, it's absolutely superb. It's one of the best lines I've ever read as a writer. Right, and it's just, it's actually very refreshing because a lot of screenwriters are so full of it. I mean, some of the guys are getting bucks and they're just like, oh. Anyway, sorry, go on. What are your thoughts?
I think it creates a more natural dialogue because the characters just, you know, went off. But also what was interesting was the amount of backstory that came out in the dialogue.
Right.
Of why they're arguing and why they can't, why their perspectives are very different.
Mm.
So that was quite a good way of bringing out huge amounts of backstory that's completely relevant to the characters without actually parking in front of people. Now I'm going to tell you some backstory.
Right, exactly.
I found it quite helpful.
Did you find the exercise sort of liberating in ways?
Yeah, because once you stop trying to control it, it becomes a lot more natural.
Brilliant. I've done my evil work for the day. How about you?
Yeah, I'm writing something where I need a very large, big reveal conflict towards the end, the climax. And I've been putting off writing it. And so I took this as a chance to have a go. And to be honest, I've come up with all sorts of things that I didn't realise could be in this conflict. So I've got a lot of new ideas about what she might be upset about.
Yeah.
I hadn't realised.
That's awesome.
Good.
That's awesome. How are you?
I enjoyed it. I mean, like with any conversation, you can get into conflict quite quickly. And you can get into the nasty dark area very quickly as well. So yeah, it's very interesting, very intriguing.
So what was the difference between where you started off and where you ended up?
In a nasty stage. They were getting on and then they were on each other's nerves.
So were there sort of eureka moments in your writing and the characters that kind of go, hold on, I didn't see that happening, and
yeah, you get the unexpected.
Great, yes, that's
But that's
exactly what we were
nice.
looking for. Yeah, avoid the mundane, go for the unexpected. Lady in the blue sweater, hi. What was your experience?
Good. I found that one of the characters I like much better. So I like writing her stuff much.
As a result of the exercise?
And so I'm going to dump the other one.
Somebody just got fired. That's awesome. That's pretty good. Yeah, good. How are you?
Yeah, it was an interesting exercise. When you gave us the given circumstances,
Yeah.
the three characters all in conflict together, and you couldn't go to too much conflict because then you might lose one of the characters. So just to retain that conflict on the tightrope for the 15 minutes, it really makes you kind of drill down into the drama, make it into. Yeah, it's really good.
Good. It's also about finding your own way of working, your own rhythm. So some writers need a much more detailed, elaborate, ponderous process in order to, create these scenes and fit their dialogue and interactions within. Others are just like, they want to do it on the spur of the moment. I mean, they literally will come up with a great scene in 15 minutes. I mean, again, Hampton was sharing with me is one of the great scenes he wrote for later on 2049. It was just literally overnight. He went home, he wrote 3 or 4 pages, and he didn't need the 5 days. He didn't need the week of pondering and so on and so forth. That was his start song, and the scene ended up in the movie. And apparently Ridley Scott was complimentary about it, and apparently Ridley Scott was not known to be complimentary about much of anything. so that stood out for him. How about you?
Well, I was a bit stuck for what to write about, so I started from a real life scene that actually happened once.
Okay.
But that was the starting point.
You took real characters and then you took them into a different direction, or?
Yeah, I took them in a different direction.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
well, 2 of the characters are real, and to some extent have represented their actual voices.
Okay.
One was made up, composite.
Sure.
I think what did come out was that an awful lot of conflict, particularly perhaps in this country, is not actually about people shouting at one another. It's all subtext and people being not as helpful as they can be, or making impossible suggestions that they know are impossible.
Yeah.
And, it's that sort of, a lot of it's actually quite passive aggressive.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in sort of shouting movies at all. People like David Hare, we never raise voice in anything like this. It's absolutely sublime writing. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're stuck, take a character that you know, and then elaborate, take them somewhere completely different, or literally take a move. I mean, I don't usually recommend that, but as an exercise, it works. Take a character out of a film or something in television, and then take them somewhere completely different as your starting point. So don't be shy about doing that. If you're stuck, if you need to jumpstart the creative process. How about you?
I've struggled. I'm doing an adaptation of something, of a novel.
Yeah.
So the problem is that it's all written already, and I tried in the end to take the characters out and put them somewhere else, like a different setting. But they kind of pulled back into, the scene that I already knew. So I think I probably should have taken them even further out. I don't know, have them ordering ice cream or something. I don't know, somewhere, out of the world that they're in, and then
at times doing something like getting to order ice cream, if it's like a war scene and suddenly there's an ordering ice cream, you know what I'm saying? It takes them out of their context, out of their comfort zone, and suddenly puts them in a different light, and they will, manifest themselves, express themselves, and other things will become very apparent. Having said that, adapting a book is a very interesting process. There's several, like if you read the original, for instance, Dr. Zhivago passed on that book, right, and you watched the film, the film is so much better.
Yeah,
than the book. You get not very often, but
I couldn't read the book really.
Later on,
Do androids scream for electric sheep?
yes, thank you.
I think the film's better.
Have you read the book?
Yeah, and I prefer.
No, by country mile, absolutely. It's I've been talking to Hampton when he's said, when he went and optioned this thing, and also tedious process where he had to go through the gut.
But it's like the English Patient. I read
Yes.
the book, I watched the film, and the
Yeah.
film was, I was aghast. It was
Yeah.
so good.
Absolutely. So basically, what we are trying to say to you is, don't be scared about taking a character and then taking him somewhere completely different, especially, I mean, Jeremiah Johnson, the Robert Redford film, if you read the book, I've forgotten who wrote it 6 years ago. If you read the book, he compared, there's like maybe 4 scenes from the actual, the setting and so on and so forth, but the rest is all made up. So don't be scared. Your job as a screenwriter adapting a novel is about using the best bits, but you need to be visual, you need to be cinematic. You can't lecture people. At the end of the day, you're in the entertainment business. So have no fear. Just if somebody comes up, well, that's not accurate, that's why the book is set wrong. Your job as a screenwriter is to tell the story in the most effective way visually, so that it will get turned into something that people will want to watch. So no fear. How does it work for you?
Yeah, like think about it, I actually do exercise like this quite often when I'm feeling stuck.
Good. You get writer's block or something, right?
Yeah, I actually tend to write my entire first draft of the stream of consciousness.
Wow.
That's how I feel.
Wow, how many pages?
Entire first draft.
That's amazing.
And
How does that work out for you?
well, that's how I feel. Sorry, like I reach creative flow. Like I have to just write it as if no one's ever going to see it, and
Right.
just
Sure.
completely kind of channel it in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Can't really use that word. Go on. Yeah.
and then refine it and do
Yeah.
a million drafts. But just start off with just
Right.
absolutely stream of consciousness.
Wow, that's amazing. You must be a really good editor.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's many edits after.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I'm a rubbish editor, so I couldn't do that. But quick story on that, because you use the word channeling. That's a trigger point for me. I work with a writer in LA. One of my clients is a Harvard graduate and very complex character. And he wrote a screenplay. He had several screenplays, and he wrote a screenplay on Chris Romano. about the authorship issue with the Shakespearean plays, and this was an outstanding screenplay. And then he had one other screenplay about Martin Luther King, which is okay, and then his other screenplays were absolutely rubbish. I mean, just like in terms of, you know, when somebody does really good work, you expect most of their writing to be of a certain standard, and this script was up there, the other stuff was down here. And eventually he got to know him better and so on and so forth, and I said, you know, what gives, you know? And he said, I'm not kidding you, before he gets sued now, but I'm not gonna mention his name. He said he channeled Crystal Marlowe's spirit guide, who was Geoffrey Chaucer. And this is the guy I had to drive around England with trying to get. And all sorts of things happened that were, there's a movie in there, I mean, really scary stuff happened as a result of engaging with this guy and this kind of, you know, subliminal, kind of him delving into realms that I definitely did not fully understand, he claimed to, but yeah, anyway, but he said he wrote that entire screenplay by channeling it, and truth be told, I can't explain it in any other way, because his other writing was actually really poor. So, so I'm sorry, I had to throw that at you. How did it work for you?
I know my two characters very well.
Yes.
And I started writing the dialogue because I knew very well from the outset what they wanted to say to each other. But halfway through, they started to develop their own voice. So it's like I didn't have a role anymore,
right,
in that dialogue,
right.
and I learned things about them that they have not said before, but it was important that they voice those issues, those concerns. So the story is sort of going in a different direction, still within what I want the story to be, but we're being more informative and becoming more.
Did you find that disrupting? Or did you appreciate the fact that they were sort of off the leash and being the ring? Because I've kind of like, oh God, I just really don't want to go and create a murder mystery in my rom-com.
Yeah. No, I did like what I find, and I want to let them go and see how far they can develop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's great. How about you?
I sort of embraced the lack of sort of subtext and really just have my characters really just say to each other, this will never make it into a script, but as in their first meeting and them saying exactly what they think and what they want to say to each other, just in plain words.
Yes.
And it really helped me nail down exactly what they want, because then you can flip back, and my plan is next to come rewrite the scene and pull everything back until they're not actually saying any of these words, but all of that means like hidden behind there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as I say, you know, for the first 10, 20 pages away, I had a writer I've been working with of late, and he'd never written a screenplay before. He hadn't even read any of these screenwriting books and so on. And I just put him through these exercises, and I was not particularly optimistic because he comes from an engineering background and so on, so he's not, you know, really heavily into literature and stuff. And look, he wanted to have a good go. And the surprising thing is, I'm not kidding, about 2 months into the process, he started delivering dialogue, which was a professional standard. I was gobsmacked. I mean, it totally made my week, and he was as surprised himself. But these kind of exercises really, you know, act as trigger points to liberate the storyteller in you, and at times the results are just amazing.
I've had a scene that I've been putting off writing because I know there's conflict needs to be in there, but I couldn't work out what it was. And actually, I'm just writing it out. I've come to the sort of realization of what it was, because I had, I've got a mother who's on the run from the police, and she's going to her father-in-law to basically say to him, "You need to look after the kids because I'm on the run." And I couldn't work out what the kernel of why he would say no, because he loves his kids, but he, and I've realised, I came to a realisation if he's got a sort of a cancer that he's not told anyone about, or a terminal disease, he can't take the kids off of her. Sure. Because then if something happens to her, so it creates that kind of, so that now I can go and rewrite the whole thing with that in mind, with that tension. So,
that's very cool. Is he going to tell her that he has?
He is. Well, she's going to realise she's going to be looking.
You know, you keep your tension as long as he's not told her, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
the heat machine can look around and start seeing like the oxygen tank.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, okay, but layer it in, make it as subtle as possible, you know, it's almost like we've done it type thing where you gradually find things out. Okay, great, excellent, well, so it's 1-0 to Jean-Claude Carrière against Robert McKee by the sound of it. Nobody crashed and burned, and that went pretty well. So I think you were all asked to prepare a pitch, an elevator pitch, or a 5-minute more pitch. Have most of you done that? Yes. I'm basically trying to give you the content of 4 lectures in 3, so the pace is going to be picking up even more. So I'm going to try and get as many pitches in as possible as we go through this. The look of fear there. So quickly because we're a bit short of time again, so let me just give you a quick insight on the pitching side of things before you go away and take a break. So first of all, the pitching myth. Always have a polished what we call elevator pitch on hand. It's like it's your job as a writer. So because you never know who you might run into. It needs to be very hence the word elevator pitch. So something really brief, 2 or 3 sentences, a paragraph, because it does happen, especially if you go to film festivals or also sort of after events and so on and so forth. You will run into people and they'll say, "Well, you got," and you will not get 5 minutes out of them or 10 minutes or something. You have to really be brief. Practice them. I used to do that myself. Practice in front of a video camera. It's brutal, but do it, and then you will just shave words, and then you will get to a stage where it really works. So there's this myth about pitching, okay, that I every time I come talk to screenwriters, they seem to have bought into this, and it basically goes along the lines of the myth is that the concept of unproduced writers being offered money to write a screenplay is, in truth be told, having been an agent, it's virtually unheard of. It is a myth. So once you have a couple credits under your belt, that becomes much more likely. Okay. But you can definitely always get somebody's interest in reading your work by having a good elevator pitch, okay? But no one's going to pay you to go away and write a screenplay at that stage. So when you're pitching, you have to entertain, act it out, show your passion for the project, make them like you, deliver a teaser. If they want to know more about after the elevator pitch, give them your full pitch, which could be 5 or 10 minutes, depends on. Very often they will tell you up front, look, you got 5 minutes, you got 10 minutes, and so on and so forth. So it's a more humane way of working with a writer, because the writer is a 20-minute pitch and they stop you halfway. That's just rude. So the object of the exercise is not to tell them the whole story, just a few key scenes to hook them, make them want to find out more, okay? Try to get them involved, asking questions. If their eyes light up about something you said, have the presence of mind to give them more. So when you're pitching, it's a two-way street. Okay, so you need to pay attention to their body language. If they're like glazing over, they're checking their phone or any of that kind of nonsense, which is incredibly rude, but it does happen, then you're not going in the right direction. If you suddenly see that person who was like glazed over, yawning, whatever, suddenly move forward and their eyes light up, and there's some kind of... It's okay, nothing I did. If there's suddenly a sign of intelligent life on planet executive, have the presence of mind to give them more of what just got their interest. Okay, so you need to be flexible. Don't learn one of these pitches off to the extent that you are completely bound to it, and if they're hanging upside down, you will still keep delivering it. Be flexible. So if something specific interests them, be able to give them more of that. Okay, that's very important. Again, pay attention to body language. So they might be listening to you, but you're also doing a lot of listening. By listening, I mean, not just what they say, but the body language, you know what I'm talking about. It's often quite obvious. Make them sit forward in their seats, hook them. Pitching is an art form. Some people are really good at it and manage to set up projects all over town. But ironically, I found they're often not the best writers. So there's some people specialize in setting up pitches around in the industry, but somehow they're not that good writers, and their stuff never gets made. But they still make good amount of money by just setting their stuff up and getting options on. Others are great writers who kind of pitch to save your lives. So it's a personality thing. Not every writer is a song and dance type person, like, you know, wanting to go on stage and be energetic about, you know, telling their story and so on and so forth. Some truly excellent writers are more introverted and they're not given to that kind of, you know, elaborate sort of web. So if you find at the end of the day, it's not your personality to do a really good pitch, try and find ways around that. Okay, avoid pitches. Or what some people do is they get writing partners, and there's an introvert teams up with an extrovert, and the other person doesn't have most of the pitching. But if you find something, if you really despise pitching and you've tried it and you're not going to improve and so on and so forth, you know, always show yourselves in the best possible light. And if it's something you're not talented to do, you don't have that spark, whatever it is, find a way around it. Just say, look, you know, I don't feel comfortable, or here's my pitch in writing, or so on and so forth. So, but avoid anything that makes you, you know, present yourself in a non-good light to these executives. Okay, it's important. But always, I'm gonna have to, because we're out of time, right? I'm gonna follow up on the pitching case studies afterwards briefly. But again, be enthusiastic about the story that you tell. If you're like, you know, standing there, I want to tell you a story about, you know, this guy who works in the bank, and you're going to bore them to tears. Okay, be exuberant. Consider it as an acting exercise. It's very important to show, because if they're kind of going, well, if this person is not able to muster enough passion and enthusiasm for their own story, I can tell by their energy levels, then why the hell should I? How does that communicate their faith in their project, delivering you know, a film that is going to do well and appeal to people around the world? So yeah, I think we're out of time at this stage, but there's 2 more of these sessions from me. So I will get to the case studies on pitches in our next session. Okay. Any questions, by the way, before we break up? Okay, cool. Thank you.
You've got half an hour, okay? I'm afraid there's no tea and coffee, you know, put on, but I do think that the bar is open. And, a bit early for tea.
No, too early. Sure.
I was listening.
Oh, okay.
I access it through another.
Right. I'm having a good time. That's always the essence. If I don't have a good time. Yeah, I mean, I noticed initially when I asked for comments and questions, there weren't responses. So basically, when your face, I said, you know, I forced each one to participate, and I think that actually worked out pretty well, because they also hear each other's consensus and shared stories. So that kind of makes them feel more comfortable at that direction they're taking. I was chuffed about this actually, because all of them like the exercise. I kind of said, look, mate, I prefer the structure, and yeah, that's great. That's great. So I'm gonna grab some. Do I need to do a roll call, by the way, here?